I've worn it all my life. For protection. I never really understood what that...
When I say superhero, who do you think of? Superman? Spider-Man? Maybe Batman? Well, while these heroes are certainly popular in pop culture, they were not the first heroes to ever inspire our fans. Since 1936, there has been a hero silently protecting the deep woods. That's right, folks. Today we're going to discuss the mysterious vigilante clad in purple, the Phantom. This vigilante has been keeping everyone safe and has been a fan favorite for generations because of his one enduring truth. He never dies. But here's the fun part. He's not immortal because of some science fiction trickery or superpowers. No, this man is immortal because of 21 generations of justice, fear, and legacy being wrapped up as one undying ghost. Confused? I thought so. Come with me as we unmask Lee Falk's original pulp creation, The Ghost Who Walks. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. The Case of the First Phantom, Lee Falk's 1936 creation. If you seek to understand why the Phantom never dies, we would have to go back to his creation, not just in the universe, but also in the real world of comic strips. Let's rewind to 1936, more specifically, February 17th of 1936. On this day, Lee Falk, who was a writer and illustrator at the time, decided to introduce a masked hero. This hero was unlike anything the readers have ever seen, because, back in the day, spandex-clad superheroes flying around really were not a thing. Falk's hero, the Phantom, lived in the shadows of the Bengali jungles. He was dressed in purple and was cloaked in myth. From the very first strip, Phantom was well loved by all the fans. He was the right blend of action, mystique, and something that was much deeper. The narrative of the entire comic made readers believe that the Phantom could never die. Now, during this time, other pulp heroes worth mentioning are the Shadow or Doc Savage, and both of these characters were defined by their physical prowess, sheer grit, and gadgets. Unlike them, Phantom had the blend of exoticism of the jungle adventures and that mystical vibe you get from ghost stories of old seafaring lore. The Phantom was not just a crime fighter armed with pistols. Oh no, he was a legend. He was someone people whispered about in frightened tones. He was the man who could not die, and Falk specifically wanted him to be that way. I think the biggest reason why it worked out as well as it did was because of how Lee Falk created the character. Instead of making the Phantom as old as the audience at the time, he made him older than time itself, or at least seemed like he was. The origin of this character goes back 400 years, in 1536, when a young shipwreck survivor swore an oath on the skull of his father to fight evil. This man was the first Phantom. Every generation afterwards, which is now 20 as of now, his son took up the mantle, donned the same costume, and continued the legacy. But for the outside world, there always was only one Phantom, and this is how the legend was born. This mechanic of the Phantom is absolutely brilliant because he can always engage in every kind of crime story. He could be fighting pirates or Nazis and not lose any aura points. You know what I mean? He just has the vibes of an ancient Avenger who has been around for generations. And thanks to the whole lore, even though the stories are set centuries apart, they still feature the same mysterious figure, and it simply makes sense. The people of the jungle and the people outside the jungle both feel like the Phantom is a man who cannot die, and that right there, guys, is storytelling alchemy. This sleight of hand simplicity makes Phantom a genius character. Falk, when he created the Phantom, was not asking for readers to believe in resurrection or anything along those lines. He simply engineered a system where death and rebirth happened off-screen. When one Phantom died, another would take his place immediately, and the illusion would continue without pause. The mask never changed, the costume never changed, and the legend? It only grew as time went on. And back in the day, when comic strips came out in the newspaper, they did not waste a single moment to propagate the idea that no one has ever seen the Phantom die. From the very beginning, Falk gives eerie references and cryptic hints in his dialogue and narration about who the Phantom is. These little lines were not just throwaway lines, they were critical in building the myth. The readers found the whole world of Phantom very intriguing because, in this world, logic took a back seat. Falk did not give us much information to go off of when it came to the Phantom's lore, and that made fans fill the gaps with their own imagination, making them believe in Phantom even more. The mystery that surrounded the character was actually the message. Even Falk talked about it in his interviews. The main reason why Phantom is immortal is that the whole thing, this hero, is about an idea. This is about making the myth. Falk also borrowed freely from the folklore of the place he set his journey in, such as the African tribal legends, and this idea of an unkillable immortal warrior. The jungle setting of the Phantom is not meant to be a precise map. Instead, Bengala was actually a composite. It was an imagined space between curses and the colonial era conflict, where both could coexist without conflict. The terrain of Bengala seemed frozen in time, just like a myth, which elevated the mythic status of the Phantom. Unlike all the superheroes that came after the Phantom was never bound by continuity reboots or being aged out of relevance. He was always timeless, even when the world around him changed. This whole phenomenon created a psychological impact on the readers. Deacon Harold's note gave us a perspective of this impact, stating that for fans, these strips of the Phantom were like an heirloom being passed down from the parent to the child. The grandfathers who read the Phantom back in the 1940s could easily share their stories with their grandchildren with barely any explanation. The Phantom, in a way, did not just represent justice, he also represented stability, permanence, and of course, legacy. This kind of emotional connection in the ever-evolving comic world is truly rare. Most fans have accepted that in the comic book world, characters often feel disposable and, sometimes, even trend-driven. This is why Superman was rebooted every decade or so, and Batman's gallery was getting inflated with every generation. But that was never the thing with the Phantom. He remained unchanged. He was always there. He was always watching, walking, and protecting. When it comes to the Phantom, the most important and memorable aspect of the character has to be his moniker, the Ghost Who Walks. On the surface, it might seem like a cool nickname. However, in the story universe, this title comes with weight. The people of Bengala, specifically the Bandar tribe, serve the Phantom and protect his secrets because they believe he is immortal. The criminals of this universe, they fear the Phantom because they see him as a supernatural force. Even the pirates talk about the Phantom as a cursed man in purple who cannot be killed. And even though the Phantom could easily correct them, he chooses not to. Instead, he leans into the myth. This myth ends up becoming the greatest weapon. Think of how Batman uses fear as a tactical advantage. This is right up that same alley. Phantom uses immortality as a psychological advantage. His presence is enough to make enemies panic because, in their eyes, the Phantom cannot be killed. And there is no point in fighting against something or someone you cannot kill. This is the main mythology of the Phantom that bleeds into the hero's own traditions. Every single Phantom is buried in the Skull Cave, surrounded by the tombs of his ancestors who are all former Phantoms. But for those who do not know, the outsiders, they are simply the guardians of the ghost. It is poetic and morbid at the same time. A man surrounded by his own past self, reinforcing the illusion that there was only one Phantom the entire time. But for me, the most fascinating part of the Phantom's immortality has to be how the world around him buys into it. It would make sense if a few superstitious villagers believed in this story, but no. In this universe, everyone believes in him. From international criminals to smugglers, all of them have heard of the man who never dies and are terrified of him. This kind of blind belief is what takes Phantom from a hero and turns him into an urban legend. And Falk ensured that the Phantom was a story that was world-spanning. In Australia, where Phantom's popularity exploded when Frew Publications took it up, the Phantom ended up becoming a full-blown cultural icon. Fans would write worried letters when Phantom was injured, wondering if he had met his match. Children would draw the skull ring on their fingers. And over the years, each of these generations grew up convinced, at least in spirit, that somewhere out there, there is a world where the Ghost Who Walks is truly walking amongst them. So, would it surprise any of you when I tell you that Guinness World Records actually acknowledged Phantom? Yep, in 2023, they cited Phantom as the longest-running superhero to appear continuously in print. The Phantom beat Superman by 2 years. This is a symbolic win for sure, but it is also a meaningful one. Superman may have been the first ever superhero to wear his underwear over his pants, but the Phantom, he was the first one to embody deeper mythos. Passing the Skull Ring, in-universe mechanics of immortality. Now, we all know that the Phantom's immortality is not literal, so let's dive a little deeper into how the in-universe mechanics allow this illusion to be cemented completely. I have mentioned this before, but in case you've forgotten, the first Phantom was born in 1536. He was a young British sailor who was the only survivor of a brutal pirate attack. He washed ashore in the African nation of Bengala, and this is where he was taken in by the Bandar tribe, who became his lifelong allies. He swore over his father's skull that he would devote his life to fighting piracy and greed, and this gave birth to the iconic Phantom Oath that we have seen every Phantom take ever since. This moment that started the Phantom's journey was not a moment of personal vengeance, it was a generational mission. When the first Phantom died, his son took up the mantle and continued the mission. Then his son took the mantle, and so on. For over 20 generations, this tradition continued uninterrupted. Every child was trained since their youth, and every child knew their fate. They were not just inheriting a role, they were inheriting a myth. And this, my dear viewers, is the key distinction. In the Phantom's world, men are mortal, but the myth is immortal. No announcement was made every time a Phantom died and another took his place. The transition was silent. And for us, the myth continued. The Phantom continued. One of the most iconic tools owned by the Phantom has to be the Skull Ring. This is a massive engraved ring that he used to leave a mark on his enemies whenever he punches them. He brands them with a symbol of justice and fear, and for criminals, this mark is a warning. The ring is more than just a weapon. In a way, you could say it is a total. Every Phantom inherits the same ring passed down through generations, and the physical continuity reinforces the illusion. This ring is a symbolic tool and plays a role narratively, symbolically, and psychologically. These kinds of tools are rare, even amongst the superheroes. Phantom quite literally brands the flesh, and the permanence of that mark mirrors the permanence of the legend. Falk also created another chilling superstition that kept the illusion of immortality intact. Yep, we're talking about the doom of the Phantoms, the curse that befalls anyone who learns the Phantom's true identity. This isn't a magical curse, but it is certainly lethal. Those who have ever discovered the truth often meet a swift and mysterious end. Sometimes it is delivered by the Phantom himself or the loyal Bandar tribe. But sometimes, death happens due to sheer narrative coincidence. And this sends a message that states that the myth must be protected at all costs. In the universe of the story, this curse preserves Phantom's secret. Outside the universe, it not only reinforces his terrifying aura, but also deters the reader from asking too many questions. Another thing that is unique to the Phantom has to be how it embraces death or legacy changes. Instead of shying away, Phantom embraces them, but it does so behind closed doors. Falk and the later writers, everyone who worked on the Phantom, ensured that this tradition between the Phantoms was smooth and invisible to the outside world. But sometimes, the readers would get glimpses of these handoffs. One of the famous storylines of the Phantom, aptly titled The 21st Phantom, shows us the death of the 20th Phantom, the father of Kit Walker. When the elder Phantom is mortally wounded, we see him retreat into the Skull Cave and die surrounded by his ancestors. Kit, who was trained for this moment, silently took the costume and continued the work. To the outside world, nothing changed. But for us, the reader, everything changed. Up until now, we thought Phantom was just a legend, but now we knew for certain it was a man. The idea that no one man is the Phantom, but men train and become the Phantom, changes the way we understand the myth and how this myth sustains itself over the years. Another compelling arc shows us the earlier Phantoms who have fought in historic battles. These arcs showed us that the Phantom was not bound by time. He exists wherever evil rises. By actions over the years, each chapter of the story reinforces the idea that the Phantom does not die. These flashbacks, whether of the 17th Phantom dueling pirates or the 12th Phantom thwarting slave traders, add more emotional weight to the role of the Phantom. The modern Phantom has to carry the emotional weight of being the Phantom. The Skull Ring carries memories of years and years of justice, so in a way, it is a burden and an honor to own it. The Skull Cave, which also serves as his headquarters, is a massive chamber full of scrolls, artifacts, and journals. These are the chronicles of the Phantom, another key aspect of the Phantom lore. These chronicles are records kept by each Phantom during their tenure. They detail their adventures, their enemies, and the moral lessons they acquired in their lifetime in these scrolls. They are training modules, confessionals, and scriptures altogether. So, when a new Phantom takes the mantle, he does not just inherit the ring, he also inherits the Chronicles. This allows the reader and the new Phantom to know about the history. This helps the writers to maintain consistency across the centuries, and symbolically, the Chronicles remind both us and the character that the Phantom is a lineage. This is the reason why the Phantom is always prepared. He knows what kind of tactics have worked in the past. He's read about the mistakes and victories of those that came before him. So, when we see the Phantom on panels, it's not just him working with his own wisdom. He is working with the generational support of 20 men before him. No other superhero has this kind of support system or moral system. In today's climate, legacy heroes are becoming more common with the introduction of Kate Bishop, Sam Wilson, and Miles Morales. And because of that, in this climate, the Phantom feels more relevant than ever. He has been doing this even before this was considered cool. The Phantom has been doing the legacy hero thing for decades. He held his grandfather's gun, read his great-grandfather's battle logs, and wore his own father's boots, carrying all of their legacies with him as he battled his next foe. The Phantom is what happens when you take the concept of storytelling itself and turn it literal. He is not someone who needs time travel or cloning. His immortality is not some gimmick, it is a narrative structure. Every time a new Phantom takes the mantle, the story resets to a degree, but the myth? That continues seamlessly. Real-world inspirations and creative choices behind Immortality. When Lee Falk came up with the Phantom as a character in 1936, he was already more than well-versed in iconography and its importance in pulp literature. Characters like Zorro and the Shadow had built the foundations for masked vigilantes that stood outside the law. While that was all well and fine, Falk wanted to indulge in something deeper, something more mythic. In one of his later interviews, he said that he was fascinated by the idea of an eternal champion of justice. Unlike the Shadow and Zorro, Falk wanted to create someone who was completely unknowable, so he created the Phantom, someone who is seen as a ghost. And to seal the deal, Falk made him ageless. Falk rooted that myth in the central idea of the film, making it seem like the Phantom was always there and will always be. The Phantom never died. This was both practical and poetic. Practicality-wise, this allowed Falk to tell stories in any time period he wanted. Poetic because, in a way, this kind of central line created a resonance that very few heroes had. In his words, Falk wanted to create a hero who was timeless, like the legends whispered through generations, and he succeeded. I love that the audience also ate up the Phantom's story just the way Falk intended for them to do. Throughout the 40s and 50s, Falk apparently got many letters from concerned readers when the Phantom was missing or wounded from the comic strip for several days. This absence divided the fandom into two distinct sections. One said that Phantom was dead, while the other claimed that he simply couldn't be. This kind of strong fan reaction cemented the idea that the Phantom was essential. The reader did not simply root for him to win the fights, they actually believed in him. He was the world of fiction, and not a mere character in it. So, seeing this, Falk leaned into it completely. He carefully crafted the strip so that Phantom would never age before the readers. Unlike other characters who got older, married, and had kids, Falk made sure that the Phantom remained unchanged. His mask never came off, his identity was never confirmed, and his death was never shown. All of this together made the Phantom mythic instead of just iconic. In the early 20th centuries, newspaper strips were the business. Syndicated comics could reach millions of homes, and Falk, being the genius he was, realized that a hero who could exist in literally any time era was the best hero for this kind of business. So, each time a new Phantom tale began, there was no need for elaborate explanations or continuity baggage. The audience could simply drop in and understand what was happening because, after all, he is the ghost who walks. Someone who can fight and not die at all. This kind of timeless approach made Phantom the ideal franchise character. He went through Swedish reprints, Indian reprints, and even Australian publications, and still, the Phantom managed to retain his identity across the world and across cultures over decades. The Phantom through the decades, media adaptations and reinforcing the legend. As time went on, the Phantom moved out from Falk's pen and eventually landed in the hands of other artists and writers, and with that, his myth deepened. Instead of rewriting his history, all writers unanimously agreed to keep the lineage aspect and leaned more into the historical possibilities. Publishers like Dynamite Entertainment, Comico and Moonstone released past Phantoms, focusing on the 1700s and 1800s. The readers learned about the previous Phantoms and started seeing this as a role instead of a person, which sealed the immortality deal of the Phantom. In Dynamite's last Phantom of 2010, we get to see Kit Walker trying to let go of the mantle. He became a philanthropist, but then tragedy struck him, and he was dragged back into the jungle. This series showed us the cost of legacy, the idea that the Phantom's curse is also on his bloodline. These modern takes reinforce the idea that while the Phantom is not immortal, immortality might be the only option when it comes to the Phantom and Kit Walker. Many of these newer comics give us flashback scenes to add thematic layers. By showing the dilemmas of previous Phantoms who had similar dilemmas, the stories give us a universe where both the evil and the response are cyclical. Every generation has a new wave of darkness, and to combat it, you have a new Phantom. This idea was beautifully portrayed in The Phantom: Ghost Who Walks series that came out in 2009. This series focused on specific ancestors, showing how each Phantom was shaped by their era but bound by the same vow. This time-hopping story added more to the franchise and made Phantom feel eternal and relevant across centuries. The Phantom made its first debut in 1943 on a 15-chapter serial produced by Republic Pictures. This serial was black and white with a tight budget, but it was still faithful to Falk's source material. This show also cemented Phantom's immortality. In the very first chapter, we get the legend from the comic strips echoed throughout. The serial leaned into the idea that the Phantom was a mythic jungle spirit, and the costume became instantly recognizable. Tom Tyler, the man behind the mask, played the 21st Phantom as a singular character, but the writing made it evident that the Phantom was not a role, it was a mantle. This made fans realize that perhaps the superhero could mean more than a costume vigilante. Soon after that, we had the comic reinvention of the Phantom, which added more to the Phantom's legacy. My personal favorite has to be the Boom Studios' take on the Phantom. This leaned more into the psychological weight of carrying around that mantle. The Phantom was not invulnerable, but he could never show his weaknesses to anyone. His enemies believed he would not die, and that the legend needed to be maintained at all costs. This led to the beats where the Phantom would fake his own death or vanish so that his son could have the time to take over the role in secrecy. And of course, how could we ever forget the 1996 movie starring Billy Zane? This movie may not have been a box office smash, but it was the most earnest, visually faithful adaptation of a pulp comic hero ever attempted. One of the big pluses of this movie has to be how it subtly wove the legacy into the narrative. The film opens with a narrated backstory taking place in the 1500s. A young boy saw his father getting murdered by pirates and swore vengeance, finding the role of the Phantom. Then the audience comes to the 1930s, where the lineage continues. The family cove has portraits of all the Phantoms that came before our current one, all of them in the same costume with the same resolve. Billy Zane is the 21st Phantom, and while the number is never said out loud, you can understand clearly that this legend is not born, it's inherited. The film does not dwell much on the succession mechanics, but it plants the seed that this character is a part of something far larger than himself. In that era, while Batman and Spider-Man focused on identities and origin stories, the Phantom offered us a movie where there was an origin without a beginning or an end. Then after 1996, we got Phantom again, this time from the Sci-Fi Channel. They gave us a miniseries as well as a radio drama titled The Legend of the Phantom. The reviews were a little mixed because of the costume redesigns and modernized plot. However, the intention of the project was true to the source. The radio drama leaned more into the mythological aspect of the Phantom. They talked about how the people in Bengala whispered about the ghostly protector for hundreds of years. One particular segment of the show detailed how each new Phantom had to do a ceremony and take the Oath of the Skull, which was the rite of passage taken to showcase the transition of power from father to son. In the story, Kit Walker is urged to step up to the mantle right after the death of his father, not because of revenge, but because he has to preserve the myth about the Phantom. If the world knew that the Phantom had died, the legend would crumble and evil would triumph. This is the core message of many Phantom adaptations. The idea of the Phantom is far stronger than the man, so the man cannot die because if he does, the symbol would collapse. While not every fan was happy with the storytelling or the modernized tweaks, the legacy endured because the core message and the concept remained the same. Then, in 2023, Netflix surprised fans with a teaser trailer for the Phantom series. This teaser was only a minute long. It featured the dark green forestry, the voiceover, and a glimpse of the Phantom's ring. It doesn't sound like much, but it was enough to turn Phantom fans feral. Why? Because in the teaser they say, "This is not just one man." This line showcased everything that Phantom stands for. The collective myth and the Phantom existing outside the normal rules of human storytelling make him extremely appealing. According to the behind-the-scenes interviews, this new series wanted to split the time between two different Phantoms, one in the 1700s and another in the present. This way, the show would acknowledge the legend and the collective myth while also showing that the two generations, despite being years apart, are intertwined across time. This non-linear approach is a smart move. This showcases the modern storytelling that is super popular now, thanks to The Witcher, but it also embraces what the comic fans have known for years. It symbolically passes down the torch instead of trying to reboot it. With every adaptation, Phantom has made it clear that what keeps him relevant is not the superpowers, but the story. The legend is self-sustaining, and as long as one person is willing to put on the costume, the Phantom lives. The Skull Ring, Bandar Tribe, Bengala Jungle, everything is a narrative scaffolding around the central idea of justice being timeless and evil never being truly defeated. In every generation, evil has to be battled and justice has to be served, and the Phantom will always be there for that. Marvelous verdict. The Phantom is unique as a superhero simply because the narrative structure and the years of lore have elevated him to the status of a legend. Lee Falk's creation has survived for centuries because it is unforgettable from father to son, from strip to screen. No matter what medium he is in, no matter what language we are seeing him in, the Phantom is the constant figure of justice in this ever-changing world. His mask is a symbol, and we, as fans, celebrate it. What do you guys think about the Phantom? Let us know in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, be safe, and thanks everyone.